Ezra 3:12. But many of the older priests, Levites, and other leaders who had seen the first temple wept aloud when they saw the new temple's foundation. The others, however, were shouting for joy. The joyful shouting and the weeping mingled together in a loud noise that could be heard far in the distance. Now, I started with that because I was here, I don't know how many years ago, and I sat up there during fellowship week, and there was a guy up there with a stopwatch. And I sat next to him. I was like, "Hey, what's the stopwatch for?" And he starts it as soon as the speaker walks on stage, and he goes, "I want to see how long it takes him to get to the Bible." So I don't know if that guy's here or not, but I just wanted to ruin his day. You know what I mean? I don't think he's around, but um, anyways, let's go on with the context. Most of you guys know this story. You've probably preached this passage of scripture. This is the children of Israel had been in Babylonian captivity for 70 years, not knowing what was going to happen, and then God sent a remnant back to rebuild the temple. And I want to go back to this story, and I want to go back a little bit to verse 10. It says, "When the builders completed the foundation of the Lord's temple, the priests put on their robes and took their places to blow the trumpets. And the Levites, descendants of Asaph, clashed their cymbals." So they had drums. I know back in the day that would have been frowned upon. But it says, they clashed their cymbals to praise the Lord, just as King David had prescribed. With praise and thanks, they sang this song to the Lord. He is so good. His faithful love for Israel endures forever. Then all the people gave a great shout, praising the Lord, because the foundation of the Lord's temple had been laid. So, I read this story and I see that there's they have this tremendous celebration, and there's two groups of people there, right? It says that there some group, one of the groups was celebrating and the other one was weeping. And I'm like, what is that? And I just thought, it's just a matter of perspective is what it is. Because some of the older men literally had been in captivity for 70 years, and they remembered what Solomon's temple looked like. They remembered how majestic it was and how awesome it was. And when the Babylonians came in and destroyed everything and carried it off to Babylon, it just wrecked them. And some of these guys remembered what it was like. So they came back, and Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple, and they just accomplished this great feat. And we're going to have a celebration. And some people are crying, and some people are celebrating. Why is that? It's just a matter of perspective. And I thought about that story, and every time I read that story, I always think of the BBF. Sorry. We're gonna talk about like some of the elephants in the room that seem like no one ever talks about. So we're going to do that tonight. Anyways, but a lot of people have that perspective about BBC or Mission University now. A lot of people have that about the BBF. A lot of guys will sit around and lament about the good old days of what it was like when this place used to be packed and every seat filled. And it was. And maybe you're stuck in that. Or maybe you're newer and you go, hey, seems pretty, my son's a freshman here at school, and he doesn't remember, like he wasn't here when there was 2,700 students. He likes how it is, So it's a matter of your perspective, and that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. So let me start off by saying to President Milioni, I want to thank you for letting me speak. Probably be the last time, I'm sure. But so I might as well give you a piece of my mind while I'm up here. But I really can't afford to lose any more of that, so I'll just probably keep it to myself. I want to talk about our story, like our story. I'm part of this fellowship. I have been since 1998 when I stepped foot on campus. And I want to talk about our past, our present, and our future, if we have one. And I'm going to talk about how my story intersects with the BBF, the BBFI. This fellowship is 76 years old, started in 1950. I don't need to give you guys a history lesson, but I will a little bit. Most of you guys know the fellowship way better than I do. But I've been around, and I love history, and I do know the history of the BBF. I love history. And so I got here, like I said, in 1998. I did graduate in 2002 on time. I actually made the dean's list, contrary to popular belief. So whenever I talk about my school, even now, I always refer to it as BBC. You guys still, and I told Mark, I said, I'm just probably always going to refer to it as BBC. That's just how I've always known it. I'm not against the name change. In fact, I told Mark I was glad that he changed the name, because I can remember being here about a dozen years ago, and they had shirts that said, I love BBC on it. And I bought one, and I was wearing it, and me and Michael Haley and John Haley, we had these shirts. We were all, and I texted Michael Haley, and I was like, why are people laughing at me every time I wear this shirt? And he told me why. And I went home and burned that shirt. So I'm glad you changed the name. Listen, some of you guys don't know the reference there. Don't look it up. Like right now, don't look. Some of you guys are looking it up, especially if you have Covenant on, it's on your phone. Don't do that. You're going to get an awkward call from your accountability partner. So just trust me. Changing the name is a good thing. But so right now, this year, my church had 7 students at Mission University, and we're proud of that. I talk to our students all the time. I talk to our church. We give a come forward invitation in both services every Sunday morning. I don't ever take a day off with that every Sunday morning. And I challenge our church to surrender to ministry, to surrender to full-time ministry or missions and all that. And we've seen a response from that. We have 7 people here, including my son, and I'm proud about that. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So Mark told most of it, but like I wasn't raised in church, and I grew up in Independence. Independence is known for Harry S. Truman and being the meth capital of the world, and the Mormons started there and all that with Joseph Smith. But I got mixed up in selling drugs, and when I was 21 years old, I sold an 8-ball of cocaine to an undercover cop. Now, if you don't know how much an 8-ball of cocaine is, just ask Ron Taylor. He knows. He can show you. But I was going to say Lonnie Lerman, because every time I watch Lonnie Lerman preach, I'm like, I think that guy's on coke. You know what I mean? Like, but I love his energy. I really do. Lonnie's a good friend. So I ended up going to prison. I was in Boonville for a short time, and it's a long story. I wrote a book about it, but I went down to a chapel service because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Most of you guys have been there, and I didn't know how to change. I tried to change on my own. I tried to quit drinking. I tried to quit smoking, do all these things. I didn't know what to do. And I went down and I heard the gospel for the first time. And I said, I've tried everything else. And I just jumped in with both feet. Now, a month later, I got to get out. And the last day that I was there, I always tell this story because this changed my life. The lady, I was getting ready to go home that day, and the lady called me in her office, the counselor, and she goes, now, Joey, you're going home today. And she goes, I just want to talk to you about that. She said, the recidivism rate in Missouri is 85%. And I was like, I don't know what that word means. I can't even pronounce it. And she said, well, recidivism is the rate at which people come back. She goes, let me give you an illustration. She goes, so if 100 people get out of this prison, 85 of them will come back and see us again. And I was like, I don't ever want to see you ever again. And she goes, well, then you better do something different than what everyone else is doing. And that made sense to me. And instantly I thought, I need to find a church. Now, I didn't have a church background. The only church that I knew about I knew of one pastor about 6 years earlier. My best friend, Jeremy, his sister, had died in a car accident. She was 12 years old. And this bald-headed guy named Otis Nixdorf did the funeral. His whole family got saved and started going to church. So I kind of went with him a couple of times. And but just a handful of times I went. And so I get out of prison that day, and I go, and I'm like, I'm trying to psych myself up and I hear these, I don't hear voices in my head, but it's my own voice just saying, they're not going to let you come to their church. You just got out of prison. And I was just intimidated by it. And I knocked on the door, and I almost walked away. And I remember thinking, the last thing I thought before he opened the door was, man, he's not going to remember your name. And Otis answered the door. Otis is over here. And he opened the door, and he goes, Joey, how are you? And I was blown away that he remembered me and remembered my name. And Otis has the gift of encouragement. You're never in his presence without walking away just feeling better about yourself. And so he asked what I had been up to, and I said, well, I just got out of prison like an hour ago. I said, but I gave my life to Christ about a month ago. And I looked at him. I said, I need to find a church. And I go, can I come to your church? And he kind of chuckled because I don't know if anyone's ever asked them if they could come to church before, but I was like, no, I'm serious. I said, I don't know what the rules are. I don't know how much it costs to get in. I don't know what the entry fees are. I don't know if you let people like me, who just got out of prison. So he goes, this is Wednesday night. He goes, come back tonight. We have Bible study. This is crazy. This is back in the day. Remember back in the day, we used to have Sunday school in the morning. We would have church. And then almost everybody would come back Sunday night. Remember, to me, those were the good old days. I would have a Sunday night service. People just don't come. And the people who complain about not having a Sunday night service are the ones that don't come. Anyway, so, the pastors in here know what that's like. You just want to strangle somebody. And then we would have Wednesday night Bible study, and a good crowd would come out. And Otis goes, come back tonight. Well, I want to introduce you to everybody. So I showed up that night, and Otis put his arm around me and took me to everybody at that church and said, hey, meet Joey. He just got out of prison. And I was like, dang, man. He's telling, but it was nice because I didn't have any secrets. And I was super intimidated because to be honest, Otis will tell you, these were a whole church full of people who weren't like me. Not a lot of tattoos, not a lot of people getting out of prison. But I'm telling you, I stand here today as a person. I've been clean and sober for 29 years, and God gets all the glory on that. Last time I did anything was the night before I turned myself in. But I promise you, I would have been part of the recidivism if I hadn't have found a church. And those people, even though they weren't like me, they welcomed me into their family. It made such a big difference in my life. I just wanted to show up every time. I would show up before Otis would get. You're doing something when you get there before the pastor. You know what I mean? And I would get there, and Otis would pull in, and I'm waiting for him in the parking lot because I just wanted to be there. One day I asked him, I said, Otis, this is about a month into it. I was like, can I live here at church? And he goes, no, you can't live here. I said, but I just feel like when I'm out there, the devil's attacking me. But when I'm in here, I just feel safe. And he goes, well, you can't live here, man. Sorry. And I don't know. I loved church. And all these years later, I still love church. And so Otis was big on soul winning. He taught me how to share my faith. And we were doing David Wood's Operation Go, and we would meet every Tuesday night and study the material. And then we'd get these cards and go knock on doors. Can you imagine knocking on people's doors today? It's just not, I don't know. Some of you might do it, but it's just not the most effective thing. But back then, a lot of people would open up their door and go, "Come on in," and welcome you into their house. Not anymore. But we would go out soul winning visitation. And one day I told Otis, I said, whenever I do this, it's weird. Like, people respond. Like, I don't even know what I'm saying, but people seem to get saved. And he told me, he goes, I think you have the gift of evangelism. I said, I don't know what that is. I said, I just want to do this for the rest of my life. And this was on a Sunday morning. And the first person I got to lead to Christ was my mom. She still goes to my church. A few weeks later, my dad got saved. And my whole family goes to church now. It's an incredible thing what God has done. But I remember having a conversation with Otis, and I said, I just want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, this is all I want to do is just tell people about Jesus. And he goes, well, I think God's calling you into the ministry in some capacity. He goes, if that's the case, you probably ought to go to a Bible college. I was like, what is that? I've never heard of a Bible college. I hated school to begin with. I was like, I don't want to continue that on. But he goes, you should think about going to a Bible college. And he goes, the one I went to is down in Springfield. I've never been to Springfield, Missouri before in my life. Even Kansas City's 3 hours away. So he goes, well, just pray about it. So I go to work the next morning, and my job would send me somewhere in Missouri for the week to work on, we were install telephone lines and computer cables. So I go in the next morning, and they go, hey, you're going to be in Springfield this week. I was like, oh, hey, I might drive by and look at the school. And I drove by, and I pulled in, and I was just sitting in the parking lot. I was like, man, they're not going to let you into their school. Like, there's no way. And so I walked in, and they were like, can we help you? And I don't remember who I talked to, but they were so nice. And I told them, I said, my pastor told me I should come here. And by the time I left, I had filled out an application, and they said I was accepted to go here. And I was like, man, you guys got an easy acceptance program. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. So I started making plans to go to BBC, and I didn't heck, I didn't know what that was like. So I got down here, and it was culture shock, man. I felt like I was back in prison. You know what I mean? Like, I was reading through the handbook, and I was like, man. And Ray Adams and Brother Levergood, I remember I asked them, I said, why do we got all these rules? And they go, Joey, every one of those rules are in there for a reason because somebody did something stupid. And I was like, oh my gosh. So long story short, I ended up, I graduated, and I went, after my second year, I was back home, and God connected me with a guy in the inner city of Kansas City named Mike Bobbitt. And I'm grateful for that meeting because I met my wife there. My wife was working at the Milestone Youth Center, and so I talked to him, and I went and spoke at this youth center. And there's like 100 kids there playing basketball, doing all these things, just inner city street kids. And we did a Bible study, and they listened intently. Some of them got saved. And I told Mike, I said, man, what's the deal with these kids? He goes, Joey, he goes, these kids, some of them are on fire for Jesus, but there's no church in this area that want. I said, there's a church across the street. They go, they don't want these kids in their church. And that broke my heart. I was like, we should start a church for these kids. And I kind of just said it in jest. And then I went back and began to pray about it. And I really felt God calling me to do that. This is probably around the year 2000. I didn't know of any books. Still to this day, I don't know any books on church planting in the inner city. No conferences I can go to. There were no church planting networks. And so I was just kind of left to wing it. But I walked across the stage in 2002, and I got my diploma. And 4 months later, well, that was in May, and September 14th, I launched my church. Still to this day, it's a miracle it survived. I had no idea what I was doing. But I took the summer, I graduated, and I took the summer, and I went to Chicago to work with Charles Lyons. He's in here somewhere. And Armitage Baptist Church. That changed my life. Like, he was doing what I wanted to do with my life. And so I went up there, and I was just so impressed with his ministry up there. And then I came back, and I started this church for inner city teenagers. It was crazy. I mean, it was wild. Every Saturday night we had church, and we would do a fear factor, and I would have them. One time, Bob Bear came down for a Saturday night, and I had him eat some goldfish, like for one of the fear factors, and he was chomping on it. The eye popped out, and so it was just wild stuff. But so I started that church, and then after a year and a half, the church across the street, which was an old Baptist church, was about to close the doors. And so God worked it out. When we ended up merging our churches, they had a humongous building with no people, and we had some people, and we needed a building, so we moved over there. And it was a really great thing. I was down there for 12 years, and like I said, I met my wife while I was down there. I loved it. It was amazing. And then in 2013, I left there and came back to start a church where I grew up. I resisted that. I fought with God because I was like, there's a lot of churches in Independence, a lot of good churches, but there wasn't a lot of churches reaching the kind of people that were like me and John Stroop. And you know what I'm saying? Like where are the churches that are going to welcome them in and say, hey, you can be part of our family. In fact, we want you to be a part of our family. And so I said, that's the kind of church that we're going to start. That's the kind of church I felt like God was calling me to start. Mark mentioned this, but where our church building is currently, I used to sell drugs out of the house right across the street. So it's kind of wild how God does things, but I was such a menace to our community for so many years, and now I spent the last at least 12 years in Independence trying to be a light, trying to make a difference there, and just shining a light there. But again, I started this church. I started Grace Church 2014, and then about 7 years in, we needed a building. And so there was an old Baptist church that was dying, and COVID was happening, and they were not going to be able to keep the doors open. And so God merged us together. And so it's been a good fit. That's been 5 years ago, and it's been an awesome thing. And our church is as healthy as we've ever been. It's an amazing thing what God has done. And so I want to take you back just a little bit about in 2002. I didn't know anything about being a pastor. I didn't know anything about ministry. And I had some good mentors. My Pastor Otis Nixdorf was my mentor. And then Bob Bear came alongside of me, and Bob Baker and Keith Gilmean, and all these guys they were so nice to me. And so it was September, and Bob Bear came to me and said, Joey, have you thought about going to the national meeting? And And I said, I don't know what that is. I mean, I've never been to a pastor's meeting. And he said, well, this one's in Huntington Beach, California. And I was like, I used to live in Huntington Beach. My sister still lives out there. I would love to go. I said, I don't have any money. He goes, we're going to pay for you to go. So Antioch Bible Baptist Church paid for me to go, and I went out there, and this is like my first experience. And I'm thinking, it's at the beach, man. The only thing I packed was shorts and flip-flops and T-shirts. This was 2002. If you were a part of this fellowship back then, you know that wasn't allowed. And I walked into this church with a bunch of suits, and I was like, this is going to be rough, this is going to be. I had pastors trying to share the gospel with me. I was like, bro, I'm a pastor. Leave me alone. They thought maybe some youth pastor wandered in off the beach or something, but and then I got back and they said, well, there's a Missouri meeting. We have Missouri meetings. You should come to that. So I went. I don't remember where it was at, but I walked in, and the first guy that got up to preach, looked at me and was like, he goes, this is what's wrong with our fellowship right here, and pointed at me. I was like, what? And he goes, this guy don't have Baptists in the name of his church. And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing, it was all news to me. But he kept talking about me, and I wanted to get up and go, bro, we can go outside, you know what I mean? I ain't been saved that long, you know what I mean? Like I still have a little bit of that in me. I'm not proud of this, but I did that to a deacon one time. I know you would love to do that to a deacon, but my first church, right after we merged with this dying church, they had one deacon, and he was not qualified. And he worked the sound booth, and we were down on the stage, and he just started cussing us out. And I walked up there, I was like, bro, listen, let's go out to the back alley. And he goes, no, man, I was just kidding. But I wouldn't do that now, but I'm a little more sanctified than I was back then. But I'm just telling you, man, deacons can test you. Anyways, so I want to talk about that just for a minute, because I see everything through the eyes of a leader. Like I'm a leader, so everywhere I go, I look at things through the eyes of a leader. This room is filled with leaders, and you guys know what I mean. Like right now, some of you guys, whenever you go to another church, you spend the first 20. I do this. I spend the first 20 minutes going, why are the speakers up there? Why? They need to change that light, and they need to. Do you guys do that? And then you judge. And then the guy gets up to preach, and you're judging him. Like some of you guys probably got a scorecard right now, and you're trying. We just do that. We have this internal thing where we like to judge people, and it's hard to get away from that because we're just natural leaders. And so I look at everything through that, and I learned years ago. I used to love to study leadership. You guys remember the Enjoy Stewardship with John Maxwell? I loved it. Remember those tapes? How many of you guys had those cassette tapes? I had them all, man. I would I'd put them in my Walkman, and I'd jog around. The Enjoy Stewardship. But John Maxwell said, everything rises and falls on leadership. And I remember hearing that for the first time going, that's stupid. Like, everything doesn't rise and fall on leadership. And then he talked about it, and I started thinking about it. I was like, it's true. Every organization, every business, this college, the BBF, your church, everything rises and falls on leadership. It just does. And people who shake their head, they're not leaders, all right? And people who shake their head, yes, they go, absolutely, everything rises and falls on leadership. And so whenever we think about this, as a leader, we have to do some things. We have to make some assessments. And I want to tell you about that because that's my experience. I'm not an expert on anything, maybe hunting. I might be an expert in that, but I'm probably better than you at hunting and fishing, but not pastoring. But I merged two churches. And what I had to do when I get there, those churches were dying for a reason, right? But they didn't realize that. There was a group of people that were just going, we don't know what the deal is. We just want to go back to the good old days. If we like that's what churches do. They go, well, this is what they do. They try to put two and two together. They go, well, whenever we were healthy, when our church was the biggest, we used to have a choir, and we used to sing out of the hymn book, and we had the King James Bible, and women didn't wear pants, and so we should go back to that. But I'm like, no, that's the mindset that got you where you're at. And so it takes a leader to come in and go, let me show you where you're at. Yes, you were here, and you had a great history. You got a lot of tradition, but you can't live in the past. And so a leader comes in and goes, here's where you're at. This is a tough pill to swallow, but you are dying as a church. And maybe we could say that as a fellowship. We are dying as a fellowship. Nobody wants to admit that, but look around. We are not what we were. We are a shell of what we... I've been coming here since 1998 to these meetings. This place used to be packed out. Now, I'm not one of those people that cry about it. I'm just going to keep showing up because I'm like, if it declines and if this place dies, it ain't going to be because of me. You know, I'm going to do my part. And so a leader comes in, and not only do they assess where it's at, assess where the organization's at, but you come up with a game plan and you paint a picture of what it could look like if we make some strategic changes. And then you come up with a game plan to how to get there. That every leader in here, every pastor in here has done that with your church. You know what that's like. And people who have never had senior leader positions just don't understand that. And so that's why God made you a leader. So I want to talk about this for a second. Leadership assessment, past, present, and future. Well, I want to look at where we were, I want to look at where we are, and I want to look at where we're going. And I've only got 9 minutes, so this is going to be tough. So let's go back and to think about this fellowship. You all know it started in 1950, but it actually started. Well, the history of our fellowship goes way further back to, I don't know if is the next one this book, J. Frank Norris? I loved reading this book about J. Frank Norris. How many of you guys have read this book? Dave Stokes is an amazing author. He actually, if you read my book, he's the ghostwriter that wrote it. That's not a secret, but he's a very good author. And I read that book about J. Frank Norris, and I was like, I like the guy. You know what I mean? Like, the guy, he's my kind of preacher. Like, dude used to carry a pistol. He might shank you. You know, he loosely affiliated with the KKK. You know, I'm not saying I like that part. I'm saying that's probably, but, you know, like the KKK was very much advocates for him. And but what happened with J. Frank Norris is in 1924, they were all part of the Southern Baptists. And because liberalism had crept into the Southern Baptists, he broke away from it and started his own network of churches. And G.B. Vick and John Rawlings and all these guys were a part of that. I love John Rawlings. John Rawlings will cuss you out. You know what I mean? Like, I always heard the stories about John Rawlings. I'm like, as conservative and legalistic as some of the guys in our fellowship were, they had no problem with John Rawlings just cussing people out. And I was like, how does that work, you know? So anyways, but J. Frank Norris, you know the story, and G.B. Vick, they had their falling out. And in 1950, we started the Baptist Bible Fellowship International. Go to the next one. This is the first Tribune. Randy Harp's one of my best friends. He's the Tribune editor now. And but this was the very first one that was printed. And so that I could go all day and talk about where we were and talk about the history, but I want to show you, and this is just my opinion. A lot of this, what I'm going to tell you, you can go, I disagree with that. But if you look at the success or the population of our fellowship, it goes like this, and then in the mid-'70s, it begins to go like that. It just declined precipitously in the mid-'70s. It actually, to me, it started when G.B. Vick died in 1975. That's my opinion. We had several giants for leaders, and when they moved off the scene and they died, we didn't keep the same fervor for missions and evangelism or whatever. We didn't keep the main thing, and so we began to decline. And so let's go to the second part. I want to talk about where we are, and this is a hard pill to swallow for some people, but you already know it, because when we go out to lunch and dinner and we talk about stuff, I don't know if most, but many of our churches are in decline. Many of our churches are not growing. Their heyday was way in the past. Our fellowship is not sending enough churches to be planted. We're not planting enough churches. We're not sending enough missionaries around the world. We're not sending enough students into ministry. You guys can criticize Milione all you want about any changes he's making to the school. But when was the last time you sent a student? When was the last time you got your checkbook out and wrote a check to Mission University or Baptist Bible College, whatever you want to call it? I'm just saying, like, I'm pretty sure he would say, if you cut me a check, you can complain all you want. But we really don't want to hear it if you're just sniping and you're not participating. That's how it works. I don't care. Listen, you do that at your church. Somebody comes to you and they're not a tither. They don't give nothing. You're going to listen to them? I'm like, hold on a second. You're complaining about the money. You don't give nothing. Get out. You know, I'm like J. Frank Norris. I keep a pistol on my desk. You know what I mean? So when deacons come in, I'm like, I just tap on it and go, just be careful. You know what I mean? So I've done some informal surveys, and I told these guys I wouldn't tell them. But when I found out I was speaking, I talked to a lot of guys, called them, texted them. I said, hey, in your opinion, obviously the Baptist Bible Fellowship is in decline. We have been for a long time. In your opinion, what is your opinion of why that is? Like, what are the issues? And I got a lot of different things, and I told guys I wouldn't tell them. But one guy told me it's just the life cycle of an organization. You know, every church, every business, every organization has a life cycle, and we're just going through it. We're like on the decline. I don't know that I agree with that. I talked to several guys about it's about the legalism, it's about the King James only, it's about all this stuff. And one guy told me, one prominent person, or used to be prominent person in the fellowship, told me, Joey, I don't see any hope for the Baptist Bible Fellowship. And that broke my heart because I disagree with him. Let me just show you this. Go to the next slide. I talked to Randy Harp, and I'm gonna give you his name because Randy wrote a 300-page dissertation. If you ever can't sleep at night, you should just download this. I'm not saying it's boring. I'm just saying, like, who wants to read a 300-page dissertation? You know. So I reached out to Randy, and I go, what can you tell me about the rise and decline of the BBF? And he goes, I did a dissertation on it. And he goes, go read the introduction. So I did. I printed it out. And I know I think I'm past time, so I want to talk about just a couple things in here. And he talked about there's three reasons why. And in here he wrote about Elmer Towns. Elmer Towns wrote that book in 1969, the 10 largest Sunday schools in America. And we had 6 of them. We probably don't have any of them today, currently, but they talked about how, I just love this because this is what Elmer Towns said. He goes, to describe why we were part of the 6 out of the 10, he goes, maybe it was the youthful enthusiasm of the Baptist Bible Fellowship. And I was like, youthful enthusiasm? Yeah, maybe way back then, that's just not the case anymore. And so, and then you go to this next slide. We were, and I don't know if we still are, but among the largest, we peaked out at 4,352 churches as part of our fellowship. And so he goes on, and this is what Randy said. I want to give you just 3 things. He said it could be the structure. He talked about how that when we were started, when the Baptist Bible Fellowship was started, it was a fellowship. This is what it said: a fellowship of Bible-believing Baptist churches in 1950. And in 1960, they changed that to say we are a fellowship of pastors. And then in 1975, the structure changed from nationally elected regional representatives to state elected leaders, making the BBF, in essence, a fellowship of state fellowships. And then, so that was his thing. And then put this next one on the, he talked about this, the 3 things. No, go back up one. He talked about structure, leadership transition. Let me tell you about the leadership transition real quick. G.B. Vick in 1974, so about a year before he died, was given an interview, and the guy asked G.B. Vick, what are you going to do when you're dead? Is there a succession plan? And he goes, I haven't even thought of it. And he died like a year later. And in my opinion, that's the decline. And then divisive issues. Did you already show that chart? Go back up one, maybe that right there. Randy came up with this. He gets the credit for this. But I didn't even know what Ruckmanism was. I mean, I've heard of Peter Ruckman. I know he is. And then legalism, Calvinism, that's not a thing here, but it is, but it's not. And then I had to look up, I texted Randy. I was like, what is landmarkism? And I don't even think he knows. But anyway, so that's the 3 things the divisive issues. And I would say divisive issues are probably the main thing. So if you go to the right there, reasons for the decline, and then go to the next one. This is just my opinion. This is Joey Candillo's opinion. My opinion is we did not keep the main thing the main thing. This rings in my head all the time. My pastor, Otis Nixdorf, way back when I first started going to church, used to get up and shout and rant and rave about, he goes, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I'm like, Dr. Zeus wrote that? You know what I mean? Like, that's what it sounds, but then I started thinking about it, and it made sense. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. In my opinion, is the BBFI and Baptist Bible College, we did not keep the main thing the main thing. The reason why we started this fellowship and this college, we somewhere over time got away from that, and we got to get back to that. So I will, I don't know how much time I'm over, so let me just say this, some of the issues, worship wars, some of the divisive issues, translations, Baptist in the name, dress codes. I can't tell you what I thought when I got here in 1998, and they were like, there was this new college in Oklahoma that started, and we call it the Baptist Taliban or something. I don't know what it was, but and they were like, women can't wear pants, and I learned what culottes were. I was like, what is a culotte? You know, when I got here, I learned what a quartet was, or what Southern gospel. I learned all that stuff. I was like, I don't like it. But anyway, so I was learning all this new stuff. They had this thing that my senior year, Keith Bassam told me about. He goes, let me tell you some of the issues that caused the BBF to decline. He goes, there were hot button issues. There was the yellow. How many of you guys know about the yellow button issue, the yellow button controversy? Guys used to show up at meetings with a yellow button. I don't even know what it said, but I just know it was a thing. And then he said one of the biggest ones was in the late 60s, and there was the issue of alien immersion. And I asked him, I said, I didn't even think we had aliens. Like, are you telling? Like, is that a thing? And he goes, no, not. And then I thought, well, maybe it's illegal aliens. I was like, because that's a thing, you know, illegal aliens. When I was down at Bales in the inner city, we had a lot of illegal aliens, and I had people give me grief because I would baptize them. They go, you can't. I mean, that's illegal or something. I'm like, it's not illegal. So what I would do is I would take someone who was not here legally, and I would share the gospel with them and get them saved. I would baptize them, and then I would have immigration waiting for them outside. I'm just kidding. I would not do that. Like, that would be messed up. Have ICE outside. But alien immersion. What it was is the BBF guys would not accept membership from a guy at a Bible church. Guy comes from a Bible church, you got to get rebaptized. I'm like, that is crazy. I'm Methodist, I can understand. But anyways, so I just want to say this in conclusion, and I'm gonna end with just giving you my conclusion. I don't know, to be honest, if God is done with the Baptist Bible Fellowship. I don't know. I don't want it to be the case. We are definitely not as many as we used to be. But, you know, our fellowship today is bigger than we were in 1950 when we started. So, like, if we wanted to just do a reset and start over, we have more manpower and more resources. We could really do something. But I don't know. I know our world needs it. I know this. When I go to a Missouri meeting a few times a year, I love going. When I first started going, I would drive to St. Louis. I'm like, why did I drive 4 hours just to get lectured by this guy? You know, it was horrible. And then all of those guys left, and we have a meeting now, and Phil Housley and Kevin Kolb and Kevin Carson and Keith Gilming and Daniel Duke. Man, when we see each other, we just hug each other, go out to lunch. We don't fight about anything. It's a sweet fellowship, and we're not as many as we used to be, but that's okay, because we really genuinely care about people. Let me just give you these last three, and then I'm done. This is what we need. If we're ever going to turn this thing around and go back to the basics and be a world-changing fellowship again, we need strong leadership. We need some guys that'll get up and challenge you and get in your face. John Rawlings maybe cuss you out. You know, or I don't know. I don't cuss. I'm just saying. But we need some guys. Where are the G.B. Vicks in our fellowship? Where are the Wendell Zimmermans? Where are the Noel Smiths at? Where are these guys at? Where are the guys that are going to take the reins of leadership and say, we're going this way, get on board? That's what we need. Number two is we need to look forward, not back. I love celebrating what we did, 1950 and on, but that's in the past, man. And we need to look forward. And then number three, we got to keep the main thing, and that goes back to my pastor. And then this is the last one right here. Put this on there. The best is yet to come. I don't know if the best is yet to come for the Baptist Bible Fellowship or Mission University. I like to think it is, but I know for me, because I'm only in control of me, I wake up every day, I pop out of bed every day with purpose because God's going to do something in my life today. God's going to change somebody's life today, and I get to be a part of that. So every day in my life, I think the best is yet to come. And I have bad days like everybody else, but I know tomorrow is going to be better. So let's all bow our heads, and I just want to pray over you guys, and I want to pray for the Baptist Bible Fellowship, and I want to pray for Mission University, and I want us to get excited about what God is doing. God is still changing lives all around the world. Don't you want to be a part of it? If God's not doing that in your life, you need a revival. If God's not doing that in your church needs a revival, and maybe it starts with you. And so I just want to pray for you guys, and then I'm done. God, I want to thank you for the history of the BVF. Thank you for Baptist Bible College. Thank you. It taught me doctrine. It taught me how to study the Word of God, and it's grounded me all these years later. And some of my best friends are in this room. Some of my best friends are part of the Baptist Bible Fellowship. And I pray that the best days are not behind us, but in front of us. And so only you can do that. We need a miracle. We need a revival. And I pray that you would do that. In Jesus' name, amen.